Hello, everyone. Welcome to Super. Welcome to the event. Thank you all for being here. I'm very excited. Of course, you're all here to hear me talk about the story of how I received this funding from the Mind Science Foundation and tell the story of everything and answer questions. I'm very excited to get into it. But before anything else, first, I'm very, very excited to introduce, we have the president and CEO of the Mind Science Foundation here to join us and have a quick word. So it's my pleasure to introduce Miriam Good to the stage. Let's bring her up here.
Thank you.
Hello, how are you?
Oh my gosh, it's so great to see everybody. And we are actually at our annual fundraiser for Brainstorm. And we're super excited, not only because we get to fund Brainstorm, but also this is the first time in 2 years that we've been able to hold a full fundraiser. And we're so excited. One thing that we've been able to do, and I know that Ben's going to tell you about the nuts and bolts, but I want to announce that instead of one $30,000 prize and two $15,000 runners-up, all 3 finalists will receive $30,000 with the opportunity to win a $10,000 Audience Choice Award. So we're super excited about being able to increase the amount of funding that we have available. We're super passionate about young scientists doing incredibly important work, but also in tandem with being able to communicate this to the general public. And I think that we all know that there's a real problem in our nation and probably, I don't know about around the world, but there's a problem in our nation about people not trusting or believing in science and a lot of disinformation. So it's super, super important that you as young scientists are able and encouraged to be able to communicate your science and your work in a way that really connects with the general public. So we love great science, we love young scientists, and we love that we can elevate the communication of science to the general public.
Well, amen to all of that. I mean, there are many, many things I love about the Mind Science Foundation, but I think maybe above all else, I really love that this foundation is committed to helping and aiding and helping progress the careers of scientists who are engaging in science communication. I think it's really unique in that sense, in which I will get into about how this funding opportunity is structured and how it involves the science communication portion. I think it's amazing, and I'm really, really excited to hear that the funding is increasing, and I hope everyone else is excited to hear that too. That's phenomenal news.
Yes, and so I'm going to be off. You can see one room here of very generous donors, but I'm going to run off and start greeting guests and encourage them to give more money to Brainstorm.
Awesome. Well, very exciting. I really appreciate you joining us here, and I hope you have a fantastic time tonight.
Great. Thank you so much for having me, Ben. Enjoy, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Miriam.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone. So, and the reason that happened like right in the beginning just is because Miriam, like she said, is going to do her the fundraising, the gala tonight. So that is the reason why that was like the first thing up. So now I want to sort of back all the way up and rewind all the way back and start with the story. We are here to talk about this grant and how this all happened, and to tell this story, this unique story of how I came about getting a research grant, a true research grant that funds my scientific research through TikTok. I want to start by first explaining like how I got on TikTok and like that whole process, which briefly, you know, it was an accident. I posted a video about how to wear a mask, like now we call them COVID masks, early in the pandemic, and it went viral. And I had this decision about whether I wanted to pursue it as like an opportunity to educate on the internet. Made the decision to do so, and I'm really glad I did because it changed everything. But so I was posting videos for maybe about a year or so, educational neuroscience videos, when I got this email from Miriam, and I was blown away. The email basically informed me about what the Mind Science Foundation is and what the Brainstorm Neuroscience Pitch Competition is. So Mind Science is a foundation that funds research, as Miriam just explained. They host events and stuff. They're based in San Antonio, Texas. They're awesome. And I will admit, I wasn't aware of the Mind Science Foundation before they reached out to me. And the entire base of their research and the research that they intend to fund is focused on studying consciousness and better understanding consciousness. So the research is focused on consciousness, and they do this annual event called the Brainstorm Neuroscience Pitch Competition. It is a research grant. So just like you would apply to an NIH or an NSF, one of these national research funding agencies for a research grant, this is a foundation that provides research funding for scientists. And this particular grant is extremely unique in that normally when you're applying to a grant like this, you would write a written application, and there's a bunch of additional paperwork and stuff like for the NIH, and you would send it in and then you wait. This grant is unique in that you submit your written application, your proposal, where you describe the experiments that you plan to do. And then in addition to that, they recruit a certain portion of the submissions, the applicants, to submit a video in which the applicant describes the research that they intend to do for a lay audience. So there's this built-in science communication component where every applicant is sort of challenged to explain their research both in scientific terms in this written portion and also in everyday lay terms so that anybody can understand it. And I love these types of competitions. It reminds me a lot of the 3-minute thesis, if you've ever heard of this. This is a university competition. It's typically held at colleges. It's always held at colleges, actually, where PhD students are challenged to explain their research to a lay audience in just 3 minutes. That's the whole pitch. This is very similar, but it's like instead of just winning this university honor, this is receiving a research grant that goes directly to fund that research. I think it's so cool. And it's so unique because other foundations or other funding opportunities don't include this component. So it's really a unique and excellent thing. I really hope that other foundations and funding agencies follow suit and start to do this type of thing. But anyways, going back to the email basically, Miriam was saying, hey, we actually saw your TikTok and we saw the way you explain science, and we thought we wanted to make you aware of this funding opportunity that we have called Brainstorm. And so we talked about it, and she told me about it. We did a Zoom meeting, and immediately in the Zoom meeting, I was really struck by how pleasant it was speaking with these people. You don't get an opportunity when you apply to NIH grants and things like that to like make that connection. And you can talk to the funding officer, but like you don't get a chance to like speak with the reviewers and stuff. And not that you get a chance to do that at Mind Science, but it was just this personal connection right away. And as you can see, if you were here when Miriam came up in the beginning, I mean, Miriam's amazing. All the Mind Science Foundation, the people who work there are incredible. And so I just was immediately hit with this feeling of warmth and being welcomed. And so I was pretty busy at the time. I was starting my postdoc, but I thought, okay, you know what? I'm going to apply. I also, fun fact, if you're interested you can go to the Mind Science website, which I believe is Mind Science. Let me find it, mindscience.org. And you can learn more about the foundation itself. And David Eagleman is their chief science advisor. And if you've heard of him, he's a neuroscientist at Stanford. He also works here at Stanford with me. He studies the retina, and I believe he does at least. And he is a science communicator. He wrote and starred in the PBS show The Mind, and he's known for publicly conveying scientific findings. So he's the chief science advisor, and I thought that was awesome. So I decided to apply, and I want to talk now about the application process. So I actually am able to pull up some media. So you may have seen an NIH style grant where, so this is sort of hard to see, but hopefully you can see it. This is a typical NIH style approach where there's a research strategy. So this is the first page of my actual grant that I submitted. Again, the first stage of this all is writing a written portion. And it's NIH format. So we have the research strategy. This is the first page, the specific aims, where I'm describing this all through the entire like 3/4 of the page. I'm explaining the basics of it, like why I want to study this. And this is in scientific terms. This is not in lay terms. This is not supposed to be something that anybody can understand and read. This is for another scientist to review. And then here are my 3 aims. So normal NIH format grant, but there is a section which is the project summary for the lay public. And so this is sort of a good opportunity to practice, writing out how you might approach your presentation when you get to the video format. So there's some other components as well, like budget and justification, deliverable product. This is all very standard for a written grant proposal. So the Mind Science Foundation selects a certain portion. They read through the written applications and they decide which applicants are going to be invited to submit a video submission. So at this point, you are, this is your first opportunity to create a 6 to 7 minute video. I'm not sure if maybe it was up to 8. I don't want to speak for the foundation on that one, but mine was about 7 minutes. And you just walk through the entire grant. And so actually, if you're interested, I'm not going to play it right now because I don't want to crush 7 minutes of time. But if you are interested, on my YouTube account, you can watch my video. I'm going to go back to this view. So you submit the video, and then there's another round of review and that's at that point where the foundation reviews the videos and the written portion simultaneously and decides which of these is the top 3, which are going to be the finalists at that point. And 2 years ago, well, actually, no, because that was pandemic time, 3, maybe 4 years ago, the last time before I applied to this foundation, or to the brainstorm, it's called, what happened was the applicants submitted a written portion, then they did a video, and then the 3 finalists were flown to San Antonio where they performed their pitch live in front of a group of donors and those who work with the Mind Science Foundation. And for my year, it was unique because of COVID that they chose to do a digital submission. So there was the first video submission that was sort of like, you were invited to submit a video. I submitted that. And then once they selected the 3 finalists, what the foundation decided to do was have those finalists submit a final video. And those videos were uploaded to the website, and the voting was partially held online, or actually in this case, it was entirely held online. And I want to ask a question, because this came up when I was talking to the Mind Science Foundation another time about whether people would prefer to perform live or submit a video. And I'm actually curious. So please, you don't have to be a person who's interested in submitting this grant. I would just love to know, would you prefer to submit a digital submission or go stand on stage and perform live in person? So it looks like 100%. Oh, there's one person, or at least 25%. I assume it's one person. Okay, so it's changing now. It's a bit split. Some people would prefer digital. Some people would prefer in person. Very interesting. Myself, I was open to both. I think looking back on it, I'm kind of glad that it was digital. Standing up on stage, it's always challenging. I think that okay, so now it's evening out, so 75% digital. Doing a presentation that's intended for the layperson when you're a scientist is a challenge on its own. But doing that in person adds another level of complexity. And I think that, you're sort of selecting for different applicants. Some applicants might be really great in-person speakers, but may not be as effective at distilling information into something that's interpretable for the layperson. Whereas others may be really good at video editing and stuff. So the digital presentation might be stronger for them. So this is really interesting. I was just sort of curious about this. Okay, I'm going to go back to the meet and greet stage. And again, if you have any questions, if you'd like to ask me, please hit the Q or the join to join the queue, and then come on up and ask me a question. You can just turn on your microphone if you'd like. So yeah, in this case, it was a video submission that I did, and the foundation decided to do this online voting system, but still there was the decision to fly the finalists to San Antonio and host an in-person sort of banquet. I'm not sure what the appropriate word was for this, but it was like the brainstorm event still occurring, where there was a dinner, and I'm going to talk all about that in a second. But this was where they were going to announce the winner. And this is another poll, actually. I would like to ask everyone. Let me pull it up. So again, the foundation is based in San Antonio, and I want to ask everyone, how does a trip to San Antonio sound to you? So would you be motivated by the opportunity for them to fly you out? It was an amazing experience. I will say, put you in a really nice hotel. It's amazing. So, and I'm curious about how people feel about this. Would you be interested in flying out to San Antonio, or does it sound fantastic? Are you indifferent? Or maybe does it make you nervous, or is it just generally a no thank you? Okay, so this is interesting. And also, I suppose if you would fall into the category of I'm too busy, I don't have time to go on a trip, then you would be in the no thank you section. Okay, so personally, not that anyone asked, I would fall into the fantastic category. I love to travel, and it was really awesome experience for me. So I want to pull up some more media. Oops. So here is a photo from the banquet, and there's me with Miriam introducing me. And I just want to talk about the entire experience in itself. I flew into San Antonio. They put us in a 5-star hotel, which was really nice. And I hope Miriam was in here. I hope this is fine. I'm going to give the full details because it was actually awesome. And I think it's really motivating for people to recognize that this could be on the other end of a grant application. So it's a 5-star hotel in San Antonio. And I just had a great time. I love to travel on my own. That's kind of like, I love being in a new city that I haven't been there yet. I haven't been there before, and I love to just explore. So I got there the day before, and I'm assuming this would be the same for anyone applying now. Got there the night before, checked in, I got there pretty late, I think. So I woke up the next morning, and I went down, just sort of explored San Antonio. We had the morning off, so I went to the Alamo, which was really cool. And I just sort of explored. I will say I did go to the hotel pool and just sort of hang out, may or may not have had a drink, just casually enjoying myself. It was just really nice. I like to get away. And then maybe around 1:00 or so, we went to the building where it was being held, and it was in this beautiful old mansion. It was incredible. It was gorgeous. And there was a lunch, and there were interviews and stuff, and it was just really cool. It's like, again, such a unique experience for applying for a grant, something that is typically really not great experience, I think, for most scientists. So there was a lunch, there were interviews, and then once the guests started arriving, there was this cocktail hour. And so that's what you're seeing here, is this picture from cocktail hour, where we were sort of mingling and lots of people were around. They're all donors for the MSF. It was great. I want to take a moment to specify something. So I mentioned that a few years ago, they did an in-person presentation, sort of like a TED Talk kind of deal. But then in more recent years, starting with last year, it was a video submission. I'm pretty sure, 99% sure, this year is once again a video submission. And there we go. So they're no longer doing the in-person talk. I think the foundation actually may recognize that, that may deter some people. It can be a little bit scary going up there. So if you're interested in applying for the grant, but are uncertain about doing that in-person presentation, fear no more, because it will be video, I'm pretty sure. So at the event, okay, yeah, there's a chat. It sounds honestly very appealing. A whole dinner and Shark Tank style pitch meeting sounds like a lot of fun to me. Okay, so Jay, you're inclined toward that type of thing. I agree. I mean, I think the idea of stepping on stage and delivering a pitch, it's nerve-wracking, but it's also, I don't know, myself, I like a challenge. I think the hardest part about it, honestly, would be remembering every detail and every word of a 7-minute long pitch, because I feel like when you're presenting science to a lay audience, every word choice matters. And so for me, when I was preparing my video, I was very, very careful and thoughtful about the use of each word. And the same is true for when I make videos on TikTok. You know, if I use the wrong word and the viewer misunderstands something or just gets lost, it's pretty much over. There's no way that they're going to find their way back in after that. Or if you use an analogy that's not entirely effective, there are just many ways to lose your audience in confusion. And so, and especially when you're on stage, you're performing live and you're nervous and you're trying to remember that I need to use that specific word or that specific phrasing, I feel that you're more likely to make a mistake potentially. So, and again, it appeals to different strong suits. Some people may be good at editing videos. Some people may be great at public speaking. So they announced the winner, and I was the winner. It was amazing. It was very exciting. And after this, it was like it was like chaos. There's a lot of anticipation. Everyone was really excited to see who won, and it wasn't like madness chaos. It was great chaos. So they actually, let me see, I think I have a picture of this. So they pulled us up and gave us these big, huge checks. There I am with the other finalists who were amazing. Their presentations were all incredible. And in my opinion, they were every bit as deserving of first place. But last year, the second place winners, the runners up, who are still finalists, received $15,000. So just by going to San Antonio, being recognized as a finalist, you would receive at least $15,000, and then the first place winner would receive $30,000. This year, the coming year, it's as Miriam indicated, all three finalists receive $30,000, and the first place winner receives $40,000. So they've increased the funding substantially, which is amazing. I think, $30,000, $40,000. It's, for people comparing to an NIH R01 grant that's like $1 million, people might think, oh, well, what do you use this money for? How do you fund a lab? But this is a grant that's intended for an individual student or postdoc. And I mean, $30,000 in itself or $40,000 goes a very, very long way for an individual. You can also, everyone uses it differently. In my case, I'm using it for supplies and for equipment in the lab. Other people, so Vera, who is on the right, my left in this picture, closer to the podium, holding the check, she was using it for her salary. So she wanted to continue her working in her lab, but there were questions about whether the lab would acquire funding, and this allowed her to continue to extend her research and continue working as a postdoc there. So it's whatever you want to use it for. Of course, you can't use the money for going on vacation. Although last year they introduced for the first time I forget what the word is, maybe a stipend. There's an additional $1,500 for travel specifically to attend a science communication related conference. This year, I'll have to ask Miriam. We'll have to double check on that. But I believe that they're either at least continuing that or they're increasing the amount of money that's given. So again, just a fantastic thing. This foundation, this grant is built for those who are interested in science communication, but you don't have to be a science communicator. So, and this is something that I mentioned in the TikTok video that I made, is that you don't need to necessarily be making TikToks to do this. In my case, they happened to see me on TikTok and they thought, oh, this would be a person who would be potentially a strong competitor for our grant, because this is exactly what it is. It's explaining science in lay terms. But I truly, truly believe that developing skills in science communication, not necessarily for social media, but just in general, the ability to explain your science, it's not necessarily something that you will learn and then forget. I think as you practice these skills, they stay with you. And as you develop analogies to speak about your research, those analogies continue to be a part of your repertoire when you're explaining your science forever. And it sort of changes the way you think about science when you find new ways to talk about it that apply to everyone and that are inclusive to all audiences. And I just think that those skills are so important, more important than ever. But I also think that they're more valuable than ever because of things like TikTok and Instagram and Twitter and YouTube. There are all these platforms where scientists are able to use these skills for whatever they want, whether it's education or whether it's just spreading science awareness, or if you just want to use it for networking, or if you just want to use it for fun and share it with your personal circle, your friends and family. But understanding how to explain your science will always be beneficial. It will get you through job interviews. It will get you through, when you're talking to your family and they're like, hey, what's going on in the lab? And you try to explain it and they're like, no, thanks. I actually don't want to hear about this anymore because I have absolutely no idea what you're talking about. So I think if you're interested in a challenge, this grant would be an excellent thing to apply for, especially because, what do you have to lose, and what do you have to gain? Literally, you stand to gain a trip to San Antonio and $30,000 to $40,000 in research funding. So for those who are here who are interested in the grant, and please, if you're like, oh, I don't know, it sounds kind of cool, but I'm not totally sure, I would love to answer your questions and talk about specific things which are which you're interested in. So just going back in this chat, so Jay had said, I think it helps to be more candid, but trying to dumb down without misinforming them is a really hard balance to strike. Absolutely. I 100% agree with this idea that when you're communicating science to someone who's not a scientist or an audience that you're assuming has virtually no background, whenever I'm making a TikTok, for example, or in this case, I'm assuming that the audience, whoever the viewer is, doesn't know anything about this. You have to explain everything. But it's tricky to do two things. One, to simplify and find the right analogies and find the right ways to explain things without misinforming them, just like this comment says. That's exactly right, because sometimes it makes perfect sense to explain something with an analogy, but the analogy doesn't actually make sense in the true context of how whatever it is, how that thing works. And that it's a balance that you have to strike. Absolutely. The other thing that's a challenge is, sorry, I'm just reading the chat. The other thing that's a challenge is not being condescending and not appearing condescending. That's always a challenge because you don't want to oversimplify and use too simple of an analogy. Not everyone wants to be spoken to like they're 5 years old. Sometimes, though, it requires that level of explanation to build the foundation on which you will continue to explain throughout the rest of whatever the lesson is. So it's always a challenge. And again, these are just so important to develop. So there's another chat. How do your peers feel about what you do? Are they supportive, or do you feel that there is not enough audience for neuroscience? This is an excellent question. And it's a funny answer. When I was first getting started, I started on TikTok, was growing on there organically by posting videos, and then I moved over to Instagram and started posting my videos there and doing some other stuff there. I was very, very quiet and discreet about my use of these apps. For a long time, I didn't tell, actually, no, never did I ever tell anyone about my use of social media. I was actually very, very worried that people would make fun of me. I thought that scientists would look and they would laugh and they would think, what is the point of, how silly that this scientist, this dude, can go on TikTok and think that he can explain Alzheimer's disease or whatever it is in 60 seconds and miss all of the nuance and leave out all these important details and oversimplify and potentially misinform. And how could this ever be useful? That's what I was worried that people would say. And so I worked really, really hard to make sure that I wasn't spreading misinformation, that I wasn't misrepresenting certain findings in a way that people might, misinterpret them and then continue to propagate those misrepresentations. So I knew that scientists at some point would start watching, and I wanted to make sure that what they found was good. But even still, even feeling confident, I was worried about the way I presented myself. I didn't want to come off too hip and too energetic. Scientists generally always are boring and like their presentations are dry. So I was just worried about this being this personality and people making fun of it. All this to say that when my peers did discover my channels, the response was unbelievably positive. I don't remember exactly what happened, but in my PhD, I think some of my lab mates found it on accident. Like it popped up on their feed and they were like, I know this guy, what's going on here? And it just sort of started spreading within the lab and people started becoming aware of it. And I've found that people are extremely supportive. I believe that the scientific community, specifically in neuroscience, because I haven't really interacted with others outside of this field, are very, very supportive of this type of work. And they recognize that it's more important than ever. And that there is a lot of value in it. And I think there are a lot of people out there, not necessarily scientists, but creators on these applications that spread misinformation and that oversimplify and that don't do a great job of striking that balance that I was just speaking about. And I think that those people scare everyone else. I think I was worried that I would be interpreted the way that I interpret those people. And I'm not talking about anyone in general. I mean, or anyone specifically, just in general, there are like a type of creator on TikTok where it's like, let me introduce you to this thing. Like, you didn't know that this can change your life. Did you know that drinking a glass of water increases your mitochondrial levels and you feel better and you are protected from Alzheimer's? Like random stuff. I saw one that was like, if you rub your fingernails together, it stimulates stem cells, which can make your hair follicles grow. And it's just like, there's just no scientific evidence for a lot of these things. And people will just confidently say them and misinform. And when people recognize, like me, in this situation, when I see a video and I know that they're wrong, but they're being confident about it, it strikes me in this very uncomfortable way, and I never want to be perceived that way. So, I think I hope, based on the feedback I've gotten, the scientists who I've spoken with have told me that I'm able to not misrepresent information and that I do an okay job of conveying the truth about the scientific matter and not leaving out so much as to misinform. And I think that that is a critical thing. Thank you, whoever is smacking those thumbs up. I appreciate that. So going into the chat, Jay asked, would you like to collab with me sometime? I have a lot of collaborations in the works, but yes, of course, Jay. And I'm also always happy to talk with people about like my experience. That's kind of why I'm here too. And not only just talking about the experience of what the fantastic experience I had with the Mind Science Foundation, but also like on TikTok in general. So ask me any questions. Okay, so I'm going to read this chat here. What type of advice can you give me to stay motivated? My goal is to become a surgeon of any type. However, I also wanted to do neuro/psych research for people with schizophrenia. It's been a long time goal for me. However, I'm a sophomore in university and it's getting harder to keep that goal in mind. Yeah, I mean, there's no secret to motivation. I don't think. I just feel like if there is a secret, it's passion. Feeling really strongly about whatever it is that you must achieve it. I think that maybe what I'm getting, and I'm sort of playing the analyst here and reading into your message, but I suspect that maybe from your message, you're not certain about what you want to do. You mentioned that you want to become a surgeon, but you also maybe want to do psych or neuroscience research. And I think that when you don't have a clear goal to set on, it becomes more difficult to stay motivated. Myself, I always set like extremely clear goals. For a long time, I've had like very direct path in mind for my career, and I've been trying to stay on that path. So someone just gave me great advice this morning. I was talking to a friend and he said, sit down and ask yourself, what about your life do you enjoy? What things do you like to do? What things do you not like to do? Can you really see yourself doing these things long term? And like, what job opportunities are available to you? Like, what career options? And I actually literally did this today because I've always been interested in a career in academia, but I'm also considering other things. I mean, social media science communication. It's a really unique position, and I feel that it's going to continue growing. And I would not, if I were to leave academic science for anything, I think it would be something along those lines. And so what I actually did today, and maybe you can do this too, to the person who behind this message, make a list of all these things. In your case, be a surgeon, researcher, psychologist, or whatever, psychology researcher, neuroscientist, and just sort of list all the pros and cons. And I did that today, and it seems so obvious, it seems so easy and simple, but I did it and I was like, oh wow, I had 6 options and immediately like 4 of them were eliminated. It's like, these are obviously not realistic options. I would never spend my life doing this. So maybe you could try that. And once you set those clearer goals, maybe it'll help you stay motivated. But also just take things like one step at a time. Maybe set your goals on getting above a 3.0 GPA this semester, and just strive for that, and then continue to build from there. Jay said, just keep going. The methods and paths you take may never be how you imagine them. Encouraging. Always look towards your goal. Exactly right. So going back to the Mind Science Foundation, the experience, I showed this picture right here, and really funny. So these giant checks were like the star of the show. When I got this check, I was pumped. And I don't know what the other 2 finalists did with their checks, but I specifically asked the Mind Science Foundation, I said, can you please save it? Because I want this somehow. I don't know how it's going to happen. Please, I want it. A couple months later, my mom, who's in the chat and is asking, where's the large check? Winky face. My mom was like, wait. You have that check? They have that check? I need that check. So I reached out to the Mind Science Foundation and we arranged to ship it to my parents' house in Buffalo, New York. I wish I had a picture in here to show, but I can confirm that as of right now, that check is hanging on the wall in my parents' house, and it's as big as it looks. It's probably 4 feet wide by 2.5 feet tall, and it's taken up some space on the wall. So my mother is very proud, but I think that also, it shows a lot about like how great the people are behind this foundation, and that feeling of warmth that I experienced when I first joined that Zoom meeting when they originally reached out to me. Just like, it's amazing to be able to sit down and talk with the people who are behind this foundation. And I now have a long-standing relationship with these people, and it's not absurd for me to reach out and say, hey, can you mail that gigantic check to my parents' house? So they're just great people. So I actually never finished what happened here. After this, all you see right here, and I also didn't mention that when they announced the winner, I was tensely awaiting what was going to happen, and they announced that I was the winner, and I went up and Miriam was holding the mic and she said, do you want to make a speech? And I was like, oh my goodness, yes, of course, because that's just how I roll. I can't say no. And so I went up and I made I think it was not bad. I think people said, because I asked around, I was like, was it bad? People were like, no, it was good. But I was so nervous. So if you go and if you're planning to win, prepare a speech. So of course I wasn't planning to win, but if anyone goes, you should be planning to win. But yeah, so I did give a nervous, brief speech. And then after this, there was a dinner, which I don't know why this photo is sideways. Unfortunately, I can't fix that. But is this beautiful old mansion. The place is called the Argyle, actually, if you're interested in looking it up, in San Antonio. And it was just this beautiful long table. There was a mind science cake. Just an awesome, awesome experience. And I had a chance to sit next to some incredible people, some donors for the Mind Science Foundation. And it was just the room of people were incredible. There were, all sorts of some medical professionals, and just, it was just really, really cool. I don't know how to explain it, but just being in this room with the sense of like everyone's interested in promoting and enhancing science, it was a beautiful thing, and I really enjoyed it. And this dinner was fantastic. And then after this, I was extremely tired because we had, been, the anticipation was built up, and I ended up just going back to the hotel. And there is a rooftop bar at the hotel. Myself and the other two finalists went up there, grabbed a quick drink, and then it was off to bed and coming home. So, okay, let's go back to this. So if anyone has questions, please ask them now. I would love to answer them. The applications are currently open, and you can go to the website. It's mindscience.org. I will put that in the chat, mindscience.org. So, okay, to confirm, it is going to be a video and for this year's event, and I believe that there's going to be online voting. So I just feel like these types of funding opportunities are so important, and I do think that they're going to become more and more prevalent. I actually, if I had to bet, I would bet that maybe within the next 5 to 10 years, many foundations, and maybe the NIH, that may be a bold claim, will include something like this, where it incorporates not just a written proposal, but also a presentation intended for a lay audience. I really think that the field is recognizing that these skills are important. And, I have a friend who's working in my current lab. This person is applying to faculty positions, and I've heard from them that when they applied to certain universities, as for like a professor position, the university asked for their Twitter, not because they want to see if they're tweeting, inappropriate things, but because the university cared if they had a large Twitter following. And I think that that's really indicative of the current status of the field, that Twitter is where scientists go when they're on social media. And you can really see it. Like I'll see a tweet where it's like, I just saw one the other day, and it was like a joke. It was a meme, and it was about like a Western blot or something. There was a gel and there were bands, and it was a meme about a Western blot, which of course nobody would really understand unless they've taken a few biology courses or they've worked in a research lab or they're a scientist themselves. And the tweet had something like 5,000 likes, which means that there are at least 5,000 people who this resonated with, which in summary, this means that there are a lot of biologists and scientists, chemists on the Twitter platform. But you don't see the same representation on platforms like Instagram, and especially not TikTok. I think people look at TikTok like it's, kind of a weird place. It's all dancing and not the same sort of level of how acceptable it is for academics. Instagram maybe also seems like it's not necessary for scientists to be on there. But I do think that more, first there was no one on Twitter. Now there are scientists on Twitter. And it's just like the barrier between Twitter and TikTok or Instagram is that it's very uncomfortable and atypical for scientists to get behind a camera and make a video explaining science. That is not typically how science is presented. It's typically written in text, which is why Twitter is so comfortable for scientists. But I think that soon people are going to start to migrate over to these other video-based platforms. And when that occurs, universities are going to start asking, hey, not just what's your Twitter handle, but what's your TikTok handle? What's your Instagram handle? Do you have a YouTube account? And I really see the field going that way. Maybe I'm extremely biased because I'm very much engaged in social media, but I really do think that that's where the field is headed. And I think that the Mind Science Foundation and this competition specifically is a true pioneer. I think that in 10, 15 years, maybe less, we will look back and say, wow, they were doing something really early that other places weren't even thinking about yet. So looking into the questions now, or the chat, are certain neuroscience topics more desired, or are submissions topic specific? So that's a really great question. I'm so glad you asked, because I should have covered that. Like I said in the beginning, the overarching theme of the Mind Science Foundation is to fund proposals related to consciousness. But of course, consciousness, it's sort of specific, but it's also really, really broad. And there are very, very few labs studying consciousness specifically. So my interpretation, I don't want to speak on behalf of Mind Science, but my personal interpretation is that their research is focused on understanding like the way that the nervous system and specifically human beings as like higher level thinkers interact with the world around us. That because that's sort of consciousness. I define consciousness as like the ability to interpret information around you and like make decisions and be alert and responsive to your surroundings. Maybe that's not how all scientists or people would define consciousness. That's how I view it. So for my proposal, for example, it was about how social experiences in early life shape the brain's development. And the way that I framed it to relate it to consciousness was that these experiences shape how your brain functions, and that process and the resultant brain that you have will determine how you interact with the world as an adult. And so it was like, how can certain experiences alter consciousness by actually changing the way the brain is functioning on a circuit level or a synaptic level. So the other presentations were about for last year. One was about I want to say it was either yoga or mindfulness. I can't remember the exact details right now, but using these approaches I think it was using yoga to enhance mindfulness in specific population. I'm pretty sure that was Vera. And the other presentation was interesting. It was about super forgetters. So there are certain people who are super forgetters that just like don't retain information. And actually what was really cool about it was that the person who was the applicant was a super forgetter, and she was talking about her experience with it and how the research that she's doing is actually trying to better understand this. So, my research was in mice. The other two were in humans. I think that it's pretty broad as long as it's related to neuroscience in general. And, I'm going to answer the question. Would you suggest building the application around your current research or proposing specific research that would be more sexy for the application? I would recommend whatever's within reason, whatever is within the realm of possibility for you. I wouldn't propose a project that you're unable to actually do. You have to be able to actually conduct the experiments. So if you're working in a lab that works with C. elegans, worms, don't propose a project in human beings because you're not going to be able to do that. But I was going to use that to answer what I was originally going to say, but I completely misinterpreted that. So what I was going to say is that it should be related to neuroscience or psychology or something, somehow related to consciousness, but more in the realm of like behavior and cognition, but rather than something like, a grant to understand how a specific protein at the synapse alters how messages are sent between the synapse, unless you have an associated behavior that, like, oh, this synapse changes the way that mice or humans or monkeys, whatever, perform on this task. So we want to study how the synapse works. I would avoid like, biochemistry, cell biology stuff. I'm not sure that that would do as well in the context of this grant. So I hope that helped, Kaylin. So great, thank you. Excellent. Glad to hear it. Please, any questions you have, hit me. So there's another chat. I think I personally struggle having social media for personal stuff and social media for work and interests. Oh, great point. Do you have a separate account for on each platform, or do you sacrifice other things you might want to talk about on your platform and just focus on neuroscience? Yeah, I've been recently doing these workshops where I talk about science communication and just sort of give notes and tips for any students interested in getting into it. And one of the things that I say is to create a separate account for science communication. When I first started on Instagram, I created a separate account, and I'm so glad that I did, because you don't want to always, like you're saying, be stuck in presenting information related to a certain topic. You might want to talk about what you just did on vacation, but like in my case, people that follow me like don't really care about me. Like people follow my Instagram account because they're interested in learning. And I'm very, very happy about that. But like if I posted a picture of me at the gym, I think people would be like, what is this? Why is he doing this? And so you do get sort of shifted into this specific framework in the way people interpret you. And I think that probably would be very frustrating for me if I didn't have my own personal Instagram. I will say though that I never use my other personal Instagram anymore because of another thing. The people I follow on my personal Instagram are my friends and family from, throughout my life. People I follow on my professional Instagram are, colleagues and other science communicators that I've met and things like that. So the content that you see is completely different. And it's weird to open Instagram, for example, an app that you're so used to using for a certain purpose, to look at your pictures of your friends and family, and I don't know, for some reason it's satisfying to just like see what's everyone up to and swiping through photos. And when that's completely changed into something else, where in my case I follow a lot of science communicators and I'm swiping through and it's just information, it's all learning opportunities, it's exhausting. That's not what I want my feed to look like personally. You don't want to lose the ability to use those apps in the way that you're used to using them, if that makes sense. So definitely recommend a separate account. But also I've found that using social media for science communication, like, kind of ruins that original purpose. Like I rarely ever open TikTok and Instagram, or Twitter I still do, actually. That's funny. But I rarely open Twitter or TikTok or Instagram just to scroll around and explore. Twitter I still do open to just explore. But the funny thing is I don't post on Twitter not nearly as much. So maybe there's something there, something about using it just kind of like ruins it. So definitely recommend a separate account. What other questions can I answer about the application process, writing grants in general? Until any questions come in, I'm going to go back to that question I was answering about, is it better to build an application about your current research or propose something that's more applicable, sexy in the comment? I think this is sort of like a question, not necessarily about Brainstorm, but just about like grants in general and applying for grants and how this all fits into the structure of science. In my experience, I haven't applied for a lot of grants, but I have found that the best time to write a proposal and apply for a grant is right at the end of a project or at the beginning of another project. So if you're just starting a PhD, for example, and you have a proposal, you have like an idea of what you want to do, now is the time to write a grant proposal, because that's exactly what a grant is. Let me actually pull this back up. So this is my research strategy. It's kind of far away. It might be hard to see, but this is just a full page of me saying, here is what exists in the literature. Here is what we know about these topics. But based on all that information, this is what I think needs to be addressed, and this is what I think is occurring. Here are my hypotheses, and here are the experiments that I'm going to be conducting specifically. This process, like this specific aims page, is already happening at the beginning of a PhD, no matter what. Because you join a PhD or a master's, or if you're an undergraduate student working in a research lab, you are automatically doing this process. This is just getting it on paper. And I find that it can be extremely helpful because in this case, like you see, I don't think you can see my cursor, but like there are parentheses with numbers. Those are references, and those are referring to specific papers. So this is a great way to organize the literature so that a year or 2 years from now, if I'm writing up this paper, I can go back and be like, I remember that one paper that had that one finding. Now I can go just directly to this piece of text that says, mouse models of autism spectrum disorder display glutamatergic deficits in PFC. And there are 4 papers right there. Now I know where those findings were found, and then I can stop myself from having to do an entire literature review. I can just go right to my paper here. So at the beginning of a PhD is great. Also at the end of a project, because if you finish a project and you're not really like sure, if you're planning on staying in the lab, but you're not really sure what you're going to be doing next, this is the perfect time to write a grant, because it forces you to do that work, to read the literature and to come up with ideas and to prepare experiments. I think, again, this is something that all scientists do in their head. It's just a matter of you're organizing it into a structure that allows you to submit it to a grant. But there's also another position to be in, which is where you're like halfway through a project. That's also a great place to be. I mean, essentially what I'm getting at now, it sounds like, is that it's never a bad time to submit a grant. If you're early in a project, you're like midway through and there are more experiments that can be done, that's a good time to submit a grant. But actually, if you're very close to the end of a project, that's a bad time to submit a grant, because the whole purpose of a grant is to say, here's what's out there in the literature other scientists have found. Here's what we have found. Usually there's a small amount of preliminary data. Maybe certain grants require more preliminary data. Those are experiments you've already done that support the rationale for why you're doing this why you're proposing this grant. And if you have a lot of preliminary data, then there's much less to be proposing. There's not so much to ask, right? So if you're too close to the end of a project, that might not be the right time to do something like this. What that would be a good time for is something like the 3-minute thesis competition, where you're explaining what you have found, but you're not proposing anything new. So at the end of the day, though, I think it's never a bad idea to sit down and put a lot of effort into considering, what am I going to do next? What are these next experiments? What are the most important remaining questions in the research that I'm conducting? And again, it forces you to write everything down, and then when you write a paper one day, you have all these, all this text organized that you can look at and reference. The event is in October. It's on October 20th, 2022. They have an entire section of helpful hints, which is great. Yeah, let's see. There's a lot of information on there. Strongly recommend just going to check out the website on your own whenever you have time. Watch the video. Let me send the link to the apply. So it's mindscience.org. I just realized if anyone's watching this later on YouTube, mindscience.org/brainstorm/apply. Okay, so this is a very important question for me personally. Since I'm not a U.S. citizen, what opportunities would there be for me? Does Brainstorm allow for immigrants to apply? I can say with pretty strong certainty that your citizenship status should not affect your eligibility to apply. Yeah, I can't imagine a reason why that would happen. And I Jay, the person who's asking this question, you were here when Miriam joined. Miriam's fantastic. You can always get in touch with her directly and ask the question. And I'm going to say this. I hope Miriam's okay with this. The CEO, her name is Miriam Good. I just wrote that in the chat. And if you have questions, I'm sure she would be very, very happy to answer them. So I believe you can find her contact information on the website, or at least like a general contact. Okay, so they have a contact form on the website. So if you have questions, I strongly recommend that you reach out to them. They're amazing people. And you can also ask me right in this very moment. But you can also, if you can't think of questions, or later on a question hits you, you're always welcome to email me, which is benreinresearch@gmail.com. Just put that in the chat as well.
My dog.
Jay.
Oh, hi.
What's going on?
I was saying I'm happy to join, but my dog might photobomb.
That's all right. No worries. Dogs are absolutely welcome. Thank you for being here and for asking those fantastic questions.
I'm glad you're doing this. I'm glad you have a platform and you're using your platform to encourage other budding scientists to grow, and not just like gaining clout and money from this, which a lot of people do.
Well, I appreciate that genuinely. That means a lot, because it is important to me. I've had a really great experience with science communication, and really unexpected, the whole thing, but it has brought a lot of great opportunities. And so it's really like, I'm doing this because I genuinely found that this experience was incredible and unlike any other opportunity to apply for a grant. So I really strongly suggest people to do it. Are you interested in applying?
I mean, I have a few ideas. Like my current project, it's increasing in scope right now. like we have found things that I'm like, wow, this can be great, but I have to like stay in this lab for another year, and I'm not sure if my boss would be willing to fund this. But this could be like an exciting opportunity to apply for a grant. And there were other ideas in the future that I wanted to do in regards with like behavior stuff, which, if you know, our boss does not like a lot of behavior stuff. She would rather do EFES.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
yeah, there are
Yeah.
opportunities. I never thought about applying for grants that are. So this is a private group, right?
Yeah. A private
Because
foundation.
they're donors. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
So like I never thought of applying.
Yeah. I mean, it actually sounds like your situation would be ideal. It's like this would give you the funding that would allow you to stay and continue this research. I mean, there's a trade-off. You can either, like in my position, my funding for my salary was guaranteed. I'm very early in my postdoc, so I have like 5 years of guaranteed funding or something like that. So it didn't make sense for me to use it for salary, which is to my advantage because I can use it for supplies. In your situation, and like I mentioned, Vera, the other finalist, like she was using it for salary and she was applying for the exact same purpose that you would be applying, to give her the ability to extend her position. So it could be a good time. And for context, Jay works in the lab that I did my PhD in, so that's why he was talking about our boss. So I'm familiar. But it's a great opportunity. I was going to say something else, but I completely can't remember. But so yeah, there's another message that came through. I'm going to read it aloud. You're welcome to hang out up here on stage. So it says, "Hi, I found your TikTok page a while ago and I'm studying neuroscience. I really enjoy your videos and I followed you to see more. Just wanted to let you know that I think it is awesome and I feel like having educational TikToks is a great way to educate and get younger people interested in science." Melissa, I appreciate you. Thank you so much for saying that. I also just realized that I started reading that message aloud before I even like scanned it, and I'm so glad it was really nice and positive, because it could have been really mean and I would have been stuck reading aloud. But seriously, thank you. Everyone here is too nice. You're all, I appreciate you, and that's a very kind comment. I mean, that's the goal. I want to get people interested in neuroscience. It's cool. I will admit I have been criticized before by only a few people, one person. For this person criticized me for cherry picking evidence to make videos more interesting. But it's like, I can't present the entire paper. Of course, I'm here. I'm trying to make it as short and interesting and exciting as possible while leaving out as little of the nuance as possible. And like you said in the chat, Jay, like that's the challenge. But yeah, I mean, my goal is to make people interested in neuroscience because it's incredible, and it's not all molecules. There's a lot of molecules in cell biology and stuff, but it's not all that stuff. So, but what makes me wonder. So again, Melissa, thank you so much. Jay, that makes me wonder, the project that you're doing, is it all molecules?
Well, it is for sure. It is all molecules. It's a transcription factor. I mean, I can go into it.
Let's hear it.
But I don't know if this is the right time or platform to.
Well, I mean,
do it.
I suppose this is a preliminary challenge. Let's hear you describe your research in lay terms.
Well, I have been working on Alzheimer's disease for the past year now, and I found a relatively it's a very good pervasive transcription factor in our body. Helps. It's called CTCF, CCC transcription, whatever, CTCF binding stuff. But it's not usually connected with Alzheimer's disease. And I found that CTCF itself is increased in expression and there we go.
Oh yeah. The moment we've all been waiting for.
Okay. Well, CTCF is increased in Alzheimer's disease, but I found that CTCF binding as a transcription factor to genes was decreased. So it was kind of interesting. That means that the increase in expression is due to a compensatory action. The body is trying to like produce more CTCF to bind more, but that's not what's happening. Clearly, something is blocking CTCF. That's what I'm investigating, and I found something pretty cool. That is like very novel, but it needs to be proved through actual ChIP-seq and RNA-seq experiments, which takes a lot of money. And so that if I apply for a grant and if it it works out, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, well, hey, it sounds like you could use some research funding. No, I think that I'm really glad that you went through that, because I think that may sound like something that's all molecules. Like I said, it's all transcription factors, and what the heck is this guy talking about? I know what you're talking about, because this is the same.
No, I know, I did such a bad job to explain to people who probably don't know what any of this means.
No, you didn't.
So I need a lot to learn from you, I think.
No, I think you did a great job explaining it. It's very simple. I mean, bottom line, there's a molecule that's not doing its job properly in Alzheimer's, and the question is, what's going on? And so I think for purposes of preparing a proposal, an application, I think that you could simply do something like, okay, we know that this molecule is not working right. We don't know what the downstream effect of that is. We don't know if this molecule is critical in Alzheimer's. So maybe some experiments would be, let's take healthy mice and let's disrupt the function of this molecule and see if it produces Alzheimer's-like behaviors. Let's take mice with Alzheimer's and let's restore the function of that molecule and see if it elevates their performance in cognitive tests, things like that. And I think
very simple experiments, but
yeah. So, and I think those experiments, which are very much within the realm of possibility and make a lot of sense based on the preliminary data that you have, would be a good fit for something like this. It's at the end of the day, the question would be, how does this molecule or the dysregulation of this molecule affect the way that your brain functions and enables you to process the information around you? And that I personally perceive as a component of consciousness. So, and again, it doesn't have to be all about consciousness.
Yeah, so there's a very cool aspect about this molecule. So if you like make it weird, it changes how your cells behave. So they about cell-to-cell variation?
Not really.
The cells can appear differently with different organelle structure, different cytoskeletal structure. They can change shape and they faintly change in function as well. And this molecule acts on half the genome of our body, and out of that, like a significant amount that are really important genes get changed in Alzheimer's. And so it would be really interesting to see this important molecule changing, that has the ability to change cellular structure. It could be like really cool to see. If I did, this is like on top of my head, if I probably prepared better as a pitch, probably I think I would be able to convince a lot of people.
Yeah, I think this also is potentially helpful for those watching this to recognize that, like, in this case, you have some findings that indicate that this molecule's something's going on, something's wrong. You could do a bunch of proposals, based on that. You could either look at, like, why is the molecule dysregulated? What is the downstream effect of that molecule's problem in cells? Like, is it changing the function of cells? Is it changing the shape of cells? There are all these different approaches you can take, but I think that for the purposes of this grant, the most relevant experiments would be the ones that related to behavior. How does it affect cognitive function? And so, going all the way back to that question about, framing, or do you use your existing research, or do you frame it as something sexy? I think you find the framing that's going to be the most exciting for a lay audience, and I think anyone is going to be interested in the proposition of being able to target a molecule to enhance cognitive function in Alzheimer's disease. So, whereas, people might think, oh, well, that's interesting that cells can change shape. And yes, for the purposes of a scientific grant funded by the NIH, maybe maybe they would, there are scientists out there who would go crazy over that. And maybe there are people out there who are not
Oh,
scientists.
the main fact where I was going with that whole change shape thing was they specifically change neurons, specifically change how neurons fire.
Yeah.
So
interesting. So yeah. I mean, I think, and I'm just using this as an opportunity to show various ways that something could be proposed, or that a proposal could be composed. But yeah, I think this is sort of the heart of science communication. And like that person said, oh, you're cherry picking data. It's like, no, yes, technically I am cherry picking data, and then I'm plucking certain things out to talk.
But what do you show though? Like you cannot show everything. You cannot show your 10 Excel sheets.
Right. Yeah, but
you have to show representative data.
And the experiments that are selected to be presented are those which will be most universally interesting. Again, going back to the idea that my goal is to make science interesting, make people interested in science. I'm not going to share the supplemental figures showing that they confirmed that they're, that something that they thought was going to happen happened, and they did a control experiment. Those are not the things that get people excited about science. Certain things do, certain things don't.
I think it's personally, I feel that is a responsibility of the viewer to check your citations or whatever. You always say, like, you can check and read these papers. Like, you have given the access to information, and I think it's the viewer's responsibility to go and find things out, because everybody understands that TikTok is just a minute long or 3 minute long. You cannot put a lot of information that is like long scientific journals contain in a 3 minute video. So yeah. I think if you're saying that, you don't beat yourself up for this, basically. People are dumb sometimes.
Well, thank you. I think it's definitely on both. I think that every creator has a responsibility to protect their listeners, viewers, whatever. But yeah, I definitely also think that, every consumer sort of chooses where to put themselves, where to listen, where to direct their ears, and whether or not they're going to believe someone based on a confident pitch versus, backing it up themselves with some exploratory research and reading. So I want to, there's a question. So Melissa, going back.
Question.
Yeah. Thank you again. What you said, I just read your second last message. Do you think there will be long-term consequences on the development of children who had to do nearly 2 years of online schooling? This is sort of related to the proposal that I submitted to Mind Science Foundation, which is about whether isolation can affect brain development. This question sort of gets at, like, when right now is a good example, we're up here, we're having a conversation. How much of the neural circuitry involved, how much of my brain that is activated right now by this interaction through a screen where I can't, there's no three-dimensionality, I can't smell you, like weird, like little quiet cues of social interaction. How much of that activity I'm experiencing in my brain right now overlaps with what I'd be experiencing if we were interacting in person? And like, do Zoom meetings convey the same enrichment for the brain that an in-person interaction does? And if there's some absence of some valuable information, then there could potentially be some negative downstream effect in children who, if this information and this enriching activity is critical for brain development. And that's actually, so I can't really answer this question, but that's really what my research is looking on, based on the existing literature that's in mice and, monkeys and some in humans and whatever, all sorts of organisms. Isolation is generally really, really bad. There's evidence that in elderly people, isolation can have long-term consequences on health. But whether 2 years of being at home and still attending school and still interacting with the parents and stuff, that is yet to be determined. But it's definitely not good for mental health. So if there are any other questions, now is the time to throw them in the chat. If not, if you have a conversation later, conversation, if you have a question later, of course, please feel free to chat me on Instagram or whatever. preferably email me at benreinresearch@gmail.com. If you have questions about the Mind Science Foundation Brainstorm Neuroscience Pitch Competition, check it out on their website. There's plenty of details on there. And I hope that you've been inspired to apply. I hope that it has at least forced you to consider the possibility of applying for this pitch competition. I think it's so cool. And before we go, I want to ask you all, there's the ability to respond. There are these like a heart and a thumb up. There's like emojis on the side here. I want to ask you all what I've described about how I feel that in the future, places like the NIH and NSF, these major funding foundations, are going to consider and recognize the value of science communication. And I said how, like, in 10 years, I think people are going to look back and say, wow, I can't believe that Mind Science Foundation was doing that. They were the first to do that. Do you agree? If so, give me a thumbs up in here, because I really would love to know where people stand on this. Okay. All right. Major thumbs up flying. So thank you. I am really glad that you agree with this. Yes. I just love how it's so gratifying to see these thumbs up. Yes. I totally feel like this is the future of science and the future of the world. I don't think it's just science. I think it's all domains of society essentially have been permanently shifted more into the digital space by the growth and explosion of TikTok and social media in general. And I think that if science as a field wants to keep up with society and, you know, where people are looking, they need to be on social media, or at least, you know, not every scientist, but more scientists need to be represented. Because now this is where people go for their information. You know, people don't open the news, people don't open their newspaper. Some people do. Most people open up Twitter or Instagram, whatever, or maybe even TikTok, and get their news and their information from there. So finally, I'm going to read Melissa's last message. I just wanted to say, I think what you're researching is really interesting. I think a lot about the consequences of online learning in kids, and I feel like there will be a loss of some of their social development. Melissa, you should definitely check out the application I submitted to the brainstorm competition, because that's exactly what it was. Okay, so there's the video of my presentation if you're interested in it. If not, no worries. But thank you all for attending. Really appreciate it. Thank you for your questions. Thank you for your interest in science and your interest in these types of events. There are only 2 remaining. I did an 8 episode series. And so there's just 2 left. Next week's is going to be about spinal cord damage and nerve regeneration, and how something called mitochondrial biogenesis, which is the ability to induce the growth of new mitochondria within cells, may be helpful for treating certain nervous system disorders. And after that, we're going to be talking about something called CAR T therapy, which is, you may have heard of this, where you take cells out of a person and give them a specific treatment, someone with cancer, give them a specific treatment. And then what's happening is you're essentially training these cells to target and attack cancer. And then you put them back into the people. And it's like sort of a new type of chemotherapy sort of thing. So that's going to be the next 2 weeks. And then we're going to be going back to just normal old TikToks, no more long form content. So thank you so much again for attending. I really appreciate it. And if you have questions, feel free to email me, and I'll see you next time. Thank you.